My name is Helen. I'm 62, and until a few months ago, I believed my family dinners were the safest place in the world. Every Sunday, we gathered around the same oak table my late husband built with his own hands. The smell of roast chicken, the sound of my grandson's laughter, it used to mean love. But that night, everything I thought I knew about love shattered with one sentence. "Go beg on the streets, you beggar," my son shouted, his voice slicing through the clatter of dishes. For a second, I thought I had misheard him. The entire table went still. My daughter-in-law, Emily, froze with her fork halfway to her mouth. My little grandson looked between us, confused. I felt my cheeks burn. "David," I whispered, "what did you just say?" He leaned back in his chair, eyes cold, a smirk curling on his lips. "You heard me, Mom. You've been living off me for too long. If you want food, maybe you should start earning it." My hands trembled. I had moved in with David after the small stroke last winter. The doctor insisted I shouldn't live alone, and my son had offered his guest room. I had believed it was kindness. I paid for groceries when I could, folded their laundry, cooked most nights. But apparently to him, that meant nothing. Emily cleared her throat. "David, please, stay out of it," he snapped, turning to me again. "You expect us to pay your bills, cook your meals, and pretend you're doing us a favor. You're a burden, Mom. Maybe it's time you face that." The words hit harder than the stroke ever had. My throat went dry, my heart pounding against my ribs. "I never asked for luxury," I said quietly. "Just a roof." "A little kindness," he laughed bitterly. "Kindness doesn't pay the electricity, does it?" My grandson, 7-year-old Noah, pushed his plate away and whispered, "Dad, don't yell at Grandma." For a brief moment, guilt flickered in David's eyes. Then it hardened. "Go to your room," he ordered the boy. Noah hesitated, looking at me with tears welling up before slipping away. The door clicked shut, leaving the three of us in a silence thick enough to choke on. I rose slowly from my chair, trying to steady my voice. "If that's how you see me, David, I'll leave in the morning." Emily stood too, panic flashing across her face. "Helen, please, you don't have to." But David cut her off again. "She's serious? Fine, let her go. I'm done being the villain for speaking the truth." I walked to my small room, closed the door, and sat on the bed. My hands were still shaking. I could hear their muffled voices arguing in the kitchen, Emily defending me, David shouting something about entitlement. When I finally lay down, I couldn't stop replaying his words. Beggar. After all I had sacrificed, working double shifts after his father died, skipping meals so he could go to college, this was how he repaid me. The next morning, I packed my single suitcase. Emily met me in the hallway, eyes red. "Helen, please, he didn't mean it." "He's just stressed about money," I smiled weakly. "A person's true heart shows when they're angry." She hugged me tightly. "At least take some cash." "No," I interrupted. "I still have some savings. I'll manage." Outside, the air was crisp and sharp. The old neighborhood looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I had simply grown too tired to see beauty in it. I called a cab to take me to a small motel near the bus station. As we drove away, I looked once more at the house where I had raised my son and wondered when love had turned into resentment. That night, I couldn't sleep. The TV flickered with reruns of game shows, and in the silence between commercials, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Mrs. Bennett, this is Laura from Greenfield Bakery. You left your resume last year when we weren't hiring. We need part-time help now. Are you available?" I stared at the message, disbelief turning slowly into cautious hope. I had forgotten I even dropped off that resume. My heart lifted a little. Maybe this was a chance to stand again, on my own feet. At 7 a.m., I put on my cleanest blouse, tied my hair back, and walked to the bakery. The smell of fresh bread hit me like a memory of better times. Laura, a kind woman in her 40s, greeted me with a warm smile. "Mrs. Bennett, I remember you. You used to bake with us for charity events, didn't you?" I nodded. "Years ago." "Then you already know the ovens," she said. "We could use you mornings, 4 hours a day. Pays $12 an hour. You interested?" My throat tightened. Yes, I am." That day, for the first time in months, I earned my own money again. My hands were slow at first, stiff from years of housework instead of kneading dough. But soon the rhythm returned. Flour dusted my sleeves, and the ache in my shoulders felt honest. When I finished my first shift, Laura handed me a small paper bag. "For you," she said. Inside was a loaf of warm bread. "Take it home." Home. I didn't have one yet, but the words still made me smile. As I left the bakery, I saw a familiar car parked across the street. David's. He was sitting inside, engine idling, staring at me. When our eyes met through the windshield, he looked away fast. I froze on the sidewalk. Why was he there? Guilt? Curiosity? Then he drove off without a word. For 3 days, David didn't call. Not a single message. I told myself it didn't matter, that I didn't need him anymore. But at night, when the bakery closed and I returned to my tiny motel room, silence pressed down on me like a heavy blanket. I missed my grandson's laughter, the little footsteps running down the hallway every morning. I missed the smell of coffee from Emily's kitchen, even the faint creak of the old stairs. But most of all, I missed the illusion that I still mattered to my son. On Thursday, Laura offered to extend my shifts. "You're a natural," she said, smiling as she handed me my apron. "The customers love your cinnamon rolls. Want to take the Saturday market slot?" I nodded. "I'd love to." That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about how far I'd come in just a week. My body ached, but it was the kind of ache that came with pride. I wasn't begging. I wasn't depending. I was earning. But early Saturday morning, as I arranged loaves on the display table at the town market, I saw something that made my stomach twist. Emily. She stood a few stalls away, holding Noah's hand, her eyes scanning the crowd. When she spotted me, she froze. For a second, she looked like she might turn away, but then she smiled and came over. "Helen," she said softly, her voice trembling. "You look good," I smiled faintly. "Thank you. How's Noah?" Her eyes dropped. "He misses you. Every night he asks when Grandma's coming home." I swallowed hard. "And David?" She hesitated. He's not himself. He feels guilty, but he won't admit it. He's been drinking. A lot." That wasn't the answer I wanted, but it wasn't surprising either. David always buried his shame under anger. "Can I bring Noah to see you?" she asked suddenly. "Just for a little while. He talks about your stories all the time." The words nearly undid me. I nodded quickly. "Of course. Tell him I'll bake his favorite chocolate muffins." When they left, I stood there gripping the edge of my table, breathing through the storm in my chest. Maybe, just maybe, some bridges could still be rebuilt. Sunday morning came, bright and breezy. I woke early, cleaned my little kitchenette, and set out ingredients for Noah's muffins. The scent of cocoa filled the room, warm and familiar. At 10 a.m., there was a knock at the door, but when I opened it, it wasn't Noah, it was David. He looked rough. Dark circles under his eyes, stubble on his chin, and that haunted, defensive look of someone who hadn't slept in days. "Can I come in?" he asked. I hesitated, then stepped aside. "If you're here to shout again, I'd rather you didn't." He exhaled sharply. "I'm not here to fight." The air between us was thick with unspoken things. He looked around the tiny room, the modest table, the single chair. "So this is where you've been living?" "Yes, it's quiet, peaceful." "Mom," he said, sitting down. I didn't mean what I said that night. I crossed my arms. "You called me a beggar, David," he winced. "I know, I was angry. I felt trapped with the bills, the mortgage, everything. But seeing you like this, working again, it made me realize how wrong I was. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But a part of me couldn't forget how easily cruelty had rolled off his tongue. I didn't come for forgiveness," he added quickly. "I came because I need your help." Those words made my heart sink. There it was again. Need, not love. He rubbed his face, sighing. "Emily's father cut us off financially after we argued about his company. The bills are piling up. The bank's threatening to take the house." I stared at him in silence. "You came here to ask me for money?" His jaw clenched. "I know how it sounds. I just need a small loan." "You have some savings," I laughed bitterly. "Savings? David, I'm living in a motel, baking for $12 an hour. Whatever I have, I earned this week." His voice rose. "You could sell Dad's tools or that jewelry he left you." I cut him off. "Do you hear yourself? The same son who called me a beggar is now begging from me." He looked away, ashamed. I didn't know what else to do. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The ticking of the cheap wall clock filled the silence. Finally, I said, "You need to grow up, David. Stop waiting for someone to save you." He stood, his face twisting between anger and regret. "Fine, forget it. I shouldn't have come." He turned to leave. But before he reached the door, I said softly, "I'll give you something, but not money." He stopped, confused. I went to my small nightstand, pulled out a folded envelope, and handed it to him. He opened it slowly. Inside was a photo of him at 10 years old, holding a trophy from his first baseball tournament. I had written something on the back in faded ink. "You earned this, not because I gave it to you, but because you tried." He stared at it, his eyes glistening. "What's this supposed to mean?" he whispered. "It means you've forgotten who you were before money mattered," I said. "Find that boy again, then come talk to me." He didn't answer. He just nodded once, pocketed the photo, and walked out. That night, as I sat by the window, I saw the bakery's neon sign flicker in the distance. The smell of cinnamon drifted from somewhere down the street. My hands still smelled faintly of flour and sugar, and for the first time in a long while, I felt proud that I hadn't broken, that I'd stood up for myself, even if it hurt. But deep inside, a quiet ache still lingered, not for money or comfort, but for a son who had forgotten how to love. I didn't know that the next time I saw him, everything would change again. 2 weeks passed before I saw David again. During that time, I buried myself in work. The bakery became my refuge. The warm smell of yeast, the hum of the mixers, the quiet chatter of early customers. Laura noticed my exhaustion one morning as I wiped down the counter. "Helen," she said gently, "you've been here every day since sunrise." "You need rest," I smiled faintly. "I'm fine, Laura. Work keeps me sane." But inside, I wasn't fine. Every night before I fell asleep, I replayed the last conversation with David, his angry face, the guilt flickering in his eyes, the photo I'd given him. I kept wondering if he'd looked at it again or thrown it away. Then, one rainy afternoon, as I was closing the bakery, I saw headlights flash through the shop window. A car pulled up fast, too fast, and slammed to a stop. My stomach tightened when I saw who stepped out. David. He looked worse than before, pale, drenched, desperate. He burst through the door, breathing hard. "Mom," he said, his voice cracking. I messed up." My heart dropped. "What happened?" He ran his hands through his wet hair. "It's Emily. She left. Took Noah and went to her parents. She said she can't live like this anymore." I put a hand over my mouth. "Oh, David." He shook his head. "I tried to fix things. I really did. I got a new job at a construction site, but the company went under last week. I can't pay the mortgage, Mom. They're going to take the house." I stepped closer, trying to steady my voice. "You need to call Emily. Tell her you'll get help." "Maybe." He cut me off, slamming his fist on the counter. "I did call her." "She won't answer. And now the bank's calling too. I just wanted one break, one chance." His voice cracked again, and for the first time in years, I saw my son cry. The anger drained from his face, replaced by something raw and human. "David," I whispered, "sit down, please." He sat, burying his face in his hands. "You were right. I've been so stupid. I pushed everyone away. You, Emily, Noah, and now there's nothing left." Rain pounded against the window, steady and cold. I brought him a towel and a cup of hot tea. "Listen to me," I said softly. "You can start over, I did." "You can too." He looked up, eyes red. "How?" "I've lost everything." I took a deep breath. "By remembering who you are, not what you own. You're still my son, David. That means there's still something good in you. You just buried it under all that pride." He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Mom, I don't deserve your forgiveness." I smiled sadly. "Forgiveness isn't something you deserve. It's something you try to live up to." He wiped his face and exhaled. "I need to make this right. I'll pay you back for every bit of help you ever gave me." "You don't owe me money," I said. "You owe me decency. Keep your promises to your family." He stood, straighter this time, as if a small part of him had woken up again. "I will," he said firmly. "I'll fix it." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But later that night, my phone rang again, a number I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Bennett?" a deep male voice said. "This is Officer Moore from the city police. I believe you're the mother of David Bennett?" My heart seized. "Yes, what happened?" "There's been an accident, ma'am. Your son's car. It went off the highway near the bridge. He's alive, but he's in critical condition. They've taken him to County General." The phone nearly slipped from my hand. "Oh my God. I'll be there right away." When I arrived at the hospital, the hallways buzzed with chaos, nurses rushing, phones ringing. A doctor led me into a cold, sterile room where David lay pale and still, tubes and wires everywhere. "He's stable now," the doctor said. "He hit the guardrail hard, but he was wearing his seatbelt. He's lucky. Lucky." The word felt bitter. I sat beside him, holding his bruised hand. "David," I whispered, "don't you dare leave me like this." His eyelids fluttered slightly, and he muttered something, so faint I had to lean close to hear it. "Mom." I saw Dad. Tears spilled down my face. "You rest now. We'll talk later." The doctor asked me to step out while they adjusted his medication. In the hallway, Emily appeared, her hair wet, face streaked with tears. "I came as soon as I heard," she said breathlessly. "Is he okay?" "He will be," I said quietly. We stood there for a long moment, two women bound by pain and love for the same broken man. "I was too harsh," she whispered. "He's made so many mistakes, but he's still Noah's father." I nodded. "And my son. Maybe this is his second chance." 3 days later, David woke fully. His voice was hoarse, but his eyes were clearer than I'd seen in years. "Mom," he said softly, "I saw everything so clearly when I thought I was dying. You, Emily, even Dad. I kept thinking about all the things I ruined because I couldn't say thank you." I took his hand. "Then say it now," he smiled weakly. "Thank you, Mom, for not giving up on me." I squeezed his hand. "Just promise me you'll start living differently." "I will," he whispered. 2 months later, David was back on his feet, literally and figuratively. He'd gotten a job with a local repair company, started paying down his debts, and even convinced Emily to give him one last chance. And one evening, he surprised me at the bakery with a bouquet of tulips and Noah at his side. "Grandma!" Noah yelled, running into my arms. David grinned. "He's been begging to visit you." I laughed through my tears. "And you brought flowers?" "For you," he said. "And maybe a peace offering." Laura came out from the kitchen and smiled at the scene. "Looks like someone's been forgiven," David chuckled. "Not forgiven yet, but working on it." Later that night, as I walked home with the tulips in my hand, I realized something. Forgiveness wasn't a single act. It was a quiet, steady choice, one I'd keep making every day. I had found strength in the place where I'd once been called weak, and in that strength, I found myself again. For the next few weeks, life felt almost normal again. David visited every Sunday with Noah, sometimes bringing flowers, sometimes just a warm hug and that sheepish smile that had started returning to his face. We ate simple meals together, laughed about old times, and even talked about reopening the bakery on weekends as a family project, but peace never lasts long when secrets are still hiding in the dark. It began one evening when I stopped by David's house with a box of pastries for Noah. The front porch light was flickering, and the door was slightly open. Inside, David was arguing with someone on the phone. His voice was sharp, panicked. "No, I told you, I'll pay the rest next month. Please, just give me time. I can't let my mother find out." I froze in the hallway. The words hit me like a cold slap. He saw me then, standing by the door, and his face went pale. "Mom, I didn't hear you come in." I set the box on the table, trying to sound calm. "Who was that, David?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "No one important. Just the utility company." I raised an eyebrow. "The utility company doesn't threaten people, David. What's going on?" He sighed, defeated. "It's the hospital bills. Insurance didn't cover everything after the crash. I've been paying it off in small parts." My heart softened. "Why didn't you just tell me?" "Because I didn't want you to worry." But something in his tone didn't fit. His eyes darted to the corner of the room where an envelope sat half hidden under a pile of papers. I reached for it before he could stop me. Inside were receipts, not from the hospital, but from a pawn shop, and listed on one slip in bold black ink was the description, "Gold wedding band." Engraved, "To H my forever," it was my ring. The one I'd kept after my husband passed. My knees nearly buckled. "You pawned your father's ring?" I whispered. He tried to grab the envelope back. "I didn't have a choice. I needed cash fast, and you thought lying again would make it better?" I snapped. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Noah's laughter coming faintly from upstairs. "Mom," David said finally, his voice cracking, "I swear I'll get it back." "I'm already working extra hours," I held up a hand. "Stop. You said the accident changed you, David. You said you'd learned. But the truth is, you only change when life forces you to." He looked down, shame flooding his face. "I didn't want to disappoint you again." I swallowed the anger rising in my throat. "Then don't. Fix this. Not with words, but with actions." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my bare hand where the ring once sat. That little circle of gold had been my last connection to my late husband, to the man who built this family with me from nothing. And now it was sitting behind a pawn shop window because our son couldn't stop breaking promises. The next morning, I went to the shop myself. The man behind the counter recognized me immediately. "You're the owner of the ring, right?" The young man who pawned it looked devastated. I slid a few crumpled bills across the counter. "How much?" He shook his head. "Already paid, ma'am. The young man came in this morning, said he'd cover it no matter what." For a second, I couldn't breathe. "He paid?" "Yes, ma'am." "And he told me to tell you something." The man smiled faintly. He said, "Tell her I'm finally keeping a promise." I left the shop clutching the ring in my palm, tears streaming down my face. That evening, David showed up at my apartment, exhausted but proud. "I sold my old truck," he said. "It wasn't worth much, but enough to get the ring back. I wanted to fix what I broke." I didn't say a word. I just reached out and pulled him into a hug. For the first time in a long time, it felt like I was holding my son, not a stranger lost in guilt, but a man finally taking responsibility for his life. We stood there for a long time, no words, just the quiet rhythm of forgiveness. A few days later, Emily came by the bakery after closing. She leaned against the counter, watching me knead dough. "He's trying hard," she said softly. "He's been home on time every day, working extra shifts, taking Noah to school." I smiled, my hand still moving through the dough. "Maybe this time he means it." "He does," she said. "And he told me about the pawn shop. He said you forgave him." I nodded. "Because he finally forgave himself." Emily's eyes shimmered. "Thank you for not giving up on him." I almost did. I wiped my hands on a towel and looked at her. "Sometimes love isn't soft, Emily. Sometimes it's saying no until they learn to stand." The bakery flourished again that spring. David helped renovate the front, repaint the old sign, and fix the leaky roof. Noah ran around delivering cookies to customers, his laughter filling the shop. One afternoon, a regular customer said, "Helen, I see your son working with you now. You must be proud." I smiled. More than words can say. David overheard and grinned. "You know, Mom, I used to think success meant having everything. Now I know it just means not losing yourself." I laughed. "You finally sound like your father." That night, as I closed the bakery doors, I looked up at the glowing sign, "Bennett's Bread and Heart." The same sign my husband had carved decades ago. And I realized something profound. The cycle of pain had finally ended, not with revenge or punishment, but with growth. My son had once called me a beggar. Now he came to me for wisdom. And that was enough. The bakery smelled like cinnamon and new beginnings that morning. The "Help Wanted" sign was still taped to the window, though business had finally started booming again. I was wiping the counter when the doorbell chimed, and I looked up, expecting a customer. But it wasn't a customer. It was a ghost from another life. A tall man stood there in a worn brown coat, his face half hidden under a cap. His voice cracked when he spoke. "Helen?" I froze. "Mark?" "Mark Lawson, my late husband's best friend, the man who had disappeared right after my husband's funeral 30 years ago." He removed his cap, revealing gray hair and tired eyes. "You still recognize me?" "How could I not?" I whispered, my heart pounding. "You vanished after the funeral. You didn't even say goodbye." Mark lowered his gaze. "I couldn't face you. There were things you didn't know, things your husband never told you." David came out from the back, wiping flour from his hands. "Mom? Who's this?" Mark turned, his face softening. "You've grown up, David. You look just like him." David frowned. "Like who?" "Your father," I said quietly. Mark took a deep breath. "I came because I found something in an old storage locker, something that belongs to you both." He handed me a sealed envelope, yellowed with age, with my husband's handwriting across the front. "For Helen and David, when the time is right." My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a letter and an old bank document. The letter began, "My dearest Helen and David, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't tell you in person. I made a mistake years ago, one that nearly cost us everything. Mark helped me hide it, not for deceit, but to protect you both. The truth is, the bakery was never fully paid off when I passed. I took out a second mortgage to fund it, but I couldn't bring myself to tell you. I was ashamed. When I fell ill, Mark promised he'd keep it secret so you wouldn't have to worry about the debt. He paid the last installment himself, out of his own savings after I died. If he's there now, it means he's finally decided to tell you. Please forgive me for the burden I left behind, and forgive him for keeping it. Love always. Robert." I stared at the letter, the words blurring through tears. He paid the bakery debt." Mark nodded slowly. "Every cent. I couldn't stand by and watch your husband's dream die, but after he passed, I left town. I didn't want you to think I did it for pity." David was silent, his jaw tight. "So my father lied to us?" Mark sighed. "He didn't lie, son. He was protecting you. He knew you were just a boy. He didn't want your mother to lose everything." I traced the fading ink with my fingers. All those years I had cursed the world for taking my husband so soon. I never knew the quiet sacrifices behind the life we had managed to keep. Mark continued softly. "I kept a copy of the old bank papers. You can see the final payment was made in my name. Your father made me promise not to tell you until I thought you were both ready to hear it." David looked at him, then at me. "All this time, we thought Dad left us with a secure future. You carried that bakery alone, Mom. You thought you did it all yourself." I wiped my eyes. "I did, but I guess I had more help than I realized." Mark smiled faintly. "Robert always said you were stronger than anyone he knew." He was right. David reached out to shake Mark's hand. "Thank you for keeping that promise." Mark nodded, emotion catching in his throat. "He loved you both more than life itself." After Mark left, the bakery felt different, lighter somehow, as if a ghost had finally been laid to rest. David leaned against the counter. "You know, Mom, I used to hate that place. I thought it trapped us. But now I get it." "What do you mean?" He smiled faintly. "Dad didn't build a bakery. He built a reason for us to keep fighting. Maybe that's what love really looks like, staying behind in the things you leave behind." I reached for his hand. "And what about you, David? What are you going to leave behind for Noah?" He thought for a long moment before answering. "Not money, not things. I'll leave him lessons, like the ones you gave me, how to get back up when you've fallen." That weekend, the bakery held its first Community Bread Day, something David had proposed to give free loaves to families in need. The line stretched out the door, people chatting, laughing, smelling the warmth of freshly baked bread. As the last customers left, I noticed a woman standing alone outside, elderly, frail, her coat too thin for the cold. She smiled shyly when I caught her eye. "Are you still giving away bread?" she asked softly. "Of course," I said, handing her a loaf wrapped in brown paper. Her hands trembled as she took it. "Bless you, dear. You have no idea what this means to me." David came up behind me and placed a hand on my shoulder. "Everyone deserves to eat, right, Mom?" I smiled. "Right." The woman looked between us and said something that made my throat tighten. "You two remind me of my son. We haven't spoken in years, but seeing you gives me hope." As she walked away, I realized that maybe this, not revenge, not wealth, not even success, was the real inheritance I wanted to leave behind. Kindness. That night, as we closed the bakery, David looked at the old photo of his father that hung near the door. "You think he'd be proud of us?" he asked quietly. I nodded, smiling through my tears. "I think he's been proud all along." Outside, the sign glowed softly in the night air, "Bennett's Bread and Heart." The light flickered once, then steadied, casting a golden glow over everything we had rebuilt. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from forgetting, but the kind that comes from finally understanding. The world hadn't given me a perfect family, but it had given me a second chance to heal one, and this time I wasn't going to waste it. Years passed, quiet but full. The bakery stayed open, smaller now but steady, like the heartbeat of our family. The laughter of children had replaced the silence that once haunted those walls. David's boy, Noah, had grown tall and sharp-eyed, just like his father used to be. And though time had traced faint lines around my eyes, I felt younger than I had in decades. Every morning, the same ritual: unlock the door, flip the open sign, breathe in the warm air of rising bread. Sometimes I'd glance at the framed photo by the register, Robert smiling, flower on his cheek, and whisper, "We did it, love." We kept it alive. One rainy afternoon, as thunder rolled over the rooftops, I heard the familiar chime of the door. A young man stepped in, soaked to the bone, shaking the rain off his jacket. It took me a second to recognize him. "Noah?" I gasped. He grinned. "Hi, Grandma." I ran around the counter and pulled him into a hug. He'd grown taller than David now, his voice deeper, his smile gentle and sure. "Look at you," I said, stepping back to see his face. "You're practically your father's twin," he laughed. "Dad says the same thing. Says I even scowl like him." I poured us hot chocolate while he sat on the same stool his father had when he was 16. "So," I asked, "what brings you back from college in the middle of the semester?" He hesitated, drumming his fingers on the counter. "I just needed to see you. And the bakery." Something in his tone made me set my cup down. "Is everything all right?" Noah smiled, but it was the kind of smile that hides a storm. "I found something," he said, reaching into his bag. He handed me a small, wrinkled envelope. On the front, in a handwriting I hadn't seen in years, were the words, "For Grandma." "From your boys," I frowned. "Where did you get this?" It was in one of Dad's old boxes in the attic. Said it was from when he was my age. I unfolded the paper inside carefully. The ink faded, but still legible. "Mom, if you ever find this, it means I couldn't say it to your face. I never forgot the day I yelled at you at that dinner table. The way I called you a beggar, it haunts me. Every time I look at my hands, I remember how yours used to tremble after that night. You didn't deserve the son I was back then, but you deserved the man I'm trying to become. No matter where I go or what I achieve, you'll always be the reason I know what love really means. Your son, David." My eyes blurred with tears. "He never told me he wrote this." Noah's voice softened. "He didn't want to reopen old wounds. He said you'd already forgiven him in every way that mattered." I pressed the letter to my chest. He was wrong about a lot of things when he was young, but he was right about that. Noah looked around the bakery, his gaze settling on the photo of Robert. "Grandpa would be proud of you, Grandma. Dad always says you're the reason this place and this family never fell apart." I smiled through my tears. "I didn't keep it together, sweetheart. I just refused to let it break." He nodded slowly. That's what I came to tell you. I'm changing my major. That startled me. Changing? But you love architecture. I thought I did, he said. But last month I started volunteering at the community center, teaching baking to kids from low-income families. And for the first time I felt like I belonged somewhere, like Dad always said you did here. The realization hit me like sunlight breaking through clouds. You want to run a bakery? Not just one, he said, eyes bright. A foundation. Free classes, free bread for families who can't afford it. I already have a name, Heartrise. Dad said you taught him that bread only matters when it's shared. I laughed, wiping my eyes. He remembered that, did he? Every word. Noah smiled. And I want you to teach me the rest, before it's too late. Too late? I teased. I'm still standing, aren't I? He grinned. Then it settled. I'll start learning tomorrow. The next morning, the rain had stopped. Sunlight spilled across the flour-dusted counters as Noah tied an apron around his waist. He was clumsy at first, burning the first batch of rolls, dropping eggs, laughing at his own mistakes. But I saw something in his eyes. Focus, patience, love. When the final loaf came out golden and perfect, he lifted it carefully, the steam rising like a prayer. I did it, he shouted. You did, I said proudly. And remember, bread isn't just flour and water. It's forgiveness. It's time. It's heart. He looked at me, thoughtful. You sound like a philosopher, I chuckled. No, dear. Just a grandmother who learned everything the hard way. A few weeks later, I was sitting in the front window with my knitting when David walked in. He still had traces of gray in his beard, but his eyes were softer now, content, steady. Mom, he said, kissing my forehead. You'll never guess what your grandson is planning. I already know, I said, smiling. And I think it's perfect. He shook his head in disbelief. The kid's got your stubbornness. He says he won't stop until Heartrise is running in 3 towns. He will, I said, because he's got your heart and my fire. The best combination. David sat beside me, quiet for a long time, watching Noah at the counter. You ever think about how far we've come? Every day, I said softly. From shouting at each other over dinner to this, he sighed. I still don't forgive myself completely. Then let me do it for you, I said, because I already did years ago. He looked at me with wet eyes and nodded. I love you, Mom, and I whispered back, I know. Months later, Heartrise opened its doors in a bright corner of town. Noah stood beside me at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, cameras flashing, people cheering. Behind us, a mural stretched across the wall. 3 generations, 1 heart. In the center was a painting of my husband's hands kneading dough, my own beside his and Noah's smaller ones reaching forward. When Noah gave his speech, his voice was strong and clear. My grandmother once said, bread isn't just food, it's love you can taste. Everything you see here started with that sentence. I watched him from the crowd, my chest swelling with pride. David stood beside me, wiping his eyes quietly. As the applause filled the room, I thought of every broken plate, every tear, every sleepless night, and how somehow all of it had led to this moment, 3 generations. 1 promise kept. That night, when the bakery lights went out and the crowd had gone, I stayed a little longer. The air still smelled of sugar and hope. I picked up a pen and wrote one last letter to my family. If you ever lose your way, come back here. The ovens may go cold, but love never does. Your mistakes don't define you. What you build afterward does. And remember, what's made from the heart rises again. I left the letter on the counter under the photo of Robert, turned off the lights, and walked into the night smiling. 5 years later, the Heartrise Foundation had become more than just a bakery. It was a movement. 3 towns, 6 training kitchens, dozens of families who now baked their own bread and rebuilt their dignity with it. Noah was 27 now, confident but still humble, the kind of man people trusted instantly. Reporters called him the boy who turned dough into hope. Every time I read those words in the paper, I smiled and whispered a small prayer of thanks to Robert wherever he was. That morning, I watched from the front window as Noah stood outside talking to a sharply dressed woman. Her heels clicked on the pavement. Her car gleamed black and new. When she handed him a card, I saw the logo, Velmore Foods, Inc., a global food conglomerate famous for swallowing small businesses. My chest tightened. When Noah walked in, I raised an eyebrow. New admirer? He laughed, rubbing the back of his neck. Not exactly. That was Monica Velmore. She offered me a deal. A big one. I leaned on the counter. How big? He hesitated. A full partnership. They want to expand Heartrise nationally, factories, supermarkets, branded pastries. I'd be CEO. For a moment I felt proud. Then uneasy. Factories? Supermarkets? I repeated softly. That's not what Heartrise was built for. I know, Grandma. But think about it. We could help more people. Thousands of jobs. Millions fed. Or millions paying for what was meant to be shared, I said quietly. He looked away. You sound like Dad. Then maybe you should listen, I replied. That night, the offer letter sat unopened on Noah's kitchen table. David came by with dinner. So, he said, you going corporate? Noah groaned. You too, Dad? I'm just asking. You're an adult now, but don't forget why Grandma started all this. Noah sighed. It's not selling out. It's scaling up, David chuckled sadly. That's what your grandfather said when he took that second mortgage. The words hit like a hammer. I'm not him, Noah snapped. I know, David said, calm. But every man who thinks he can outgrow his roots eventually finds out the soil doesn't let go that easily. Noah stared at the envelope long after his father left. Outside, the wind howled against the windows like an old warning. The next morning, he found me sitting in the bakery, kneading dough just like old times. He poured coffee and sat beside me silently. Couldn't sleep? I asked. He shook his head. I keep hearing Dad's voice. Yours too. But I can't stop thinking, what if this is my chance to do something bigger? I wiped my hands. Noah, bigger isn't always better. Your great-grandfather used to say, when bread rises too fast, it collapses. He smiled faintly. You and your sayings. They kept me alive, boy. I touched his cheek gently. You've already changed lives. Don't let greed change yours. He nodded, but I saw the storm still brewing behind his eyes. A week later, Velmore Foods invited him to their headquarters downtown. I told him to go. Sometimes people need to stare temptation in the face before they see its teeth. When he returned that evening, his eyes were dark. They want to replace fresh ingredients with preservatives, he said. And they want me to fire all our community bakers. Automation, they call it. I nodded slowly. And what did you say? He took a long breath. I said I'd think about it. My heart sank. That night, a storm rolled in. Lightning, thunder, the sky tearing open. I couldn't sleep, so I did what I always did when the world confused me. Baked. At 2 a.m., the bell above the door jingled. Noah stood there, drenched, a broken look in his eyes. They offered me $10 million, Grandma. I froze. $10 million? He nodded. Enough to build 10 more bakeries. Or destroy everything you taught me. I don't know anymore. I walked to the oven, pulled out 2 fresh loaves, and placed them on the counter. Sit, I said. He obeyed. Take 1 bite, I told him. He did, the crust crackling under his teeth. Now tell me what you taste. He closed his eyes. Warmth, hope. Home, I smiled sadly. That's what we sell, Noah. Not bread, not brands. Hope. Can you mass produce that? He shook his head slowly, tears glistening. The next morning, the Velmore executives waited at their glass-walled office, contracts ready. Noah walked in wearing his Heartrise apron instead of a suit. Monica Velmore greeted him with a confident smile. Ready to make history? He placed a single loaf of bread on the table. I already have. Her smile faltered. Excuse me? This loaf was baked by a 16-year-old girl in our community kitchen, he said. She used to steal food from dumpsters. Now she teaches others. You can keep your contract. I'm keeping my soul. He walked out before she could reply. That evening, when he came back to the bakery, I was already waiting. He didn't say anything, just hugged me tight. You did it, I whispered. He pulled back, smiling through tears. No, we did. You, Dad, Grandpa, all of you. I poured us tea. So what now? He grinned. Now we go bigger the right way. Local partnerships, honest investors. And next month, we open Heartrise 4, I laughed. And what will you call it? He winked. Grandma's Table. A year later, as I sat at the grand opening, surrounded by families sharing bread and laughter, I felt my heart swell. The room buzzed with life, children running between tables, the smell of fresh loaves filling the air. Noah stood on stage, microphone in hand. People say success means never needing help. But I say success is remembering who helped you first. He looked at me. Everything you see here started with one woman who refused to sit quietly when the world called her a beggar. My grandmother. The crowd turned toward me, applauding. I felt tears spill down my cheeks. I raised my cup and whispered, "You've finally risen, my boy." That night, when everyone had gone, Noah found me still sitting at the counter. "Grandma, why are you still here?" he asked softly. "Because this is where every story ends," I said, "and where every new one begins." He smiled, kissed my forehead, and whispered, "I love you." "I know," I said, my voice trembling. "Now promise me one thing, anything. When I'm gone, keep baking love." "Not bread, love," he nodded. "Always." 2 years later, the bakery was busier than ever, but quieter inside my heart. Age had started whispering its warnings. Slower steps, shorter breaths, a strange tiredness that even the smell of rising dough couldn't chase away. I kept it to myself. Noah was working harder than ever, managing 4 community kitchens, flying between towns for charity events. He would rush into the bakery each weekend, kiss my cheek and promise, "Just one more project, Grandma. Then I'll rest." I'd smile, pat his hand and say, "As long as you're doing good, my boy, I can rest enough for both of us." One Sunday evening, I stayed behind after closing. The ovens had gone cold, the street outside was quiet, and the light from the sign, Heartrise 4, glowed softly through the window. I sat with a pen and one of our brown bread bags, the kind we used for takeaway orders. On it, I began to write a letter. "To my grandson Noah, if you're reading this, it means I finally went to meet your grandfather. Don't be sad. My life was full, and you were its sweetest proof. Promise me you won't stop feeding souls. Bread fills stomachs, but kindness feeds hearts. And when you doubt yourself, knead the dough. The rhythm will remind you who you are. Love always, Grandma." I folded the paper and tucked it inside the family recipe book. The same one Robert and I had started 50 years ago, right between the pages for cinnamon rolls. Then I turned off the lights, whispered, "Good night, my love," to the photograph on the wall, and went home. A week later, Noah called in the morning. "Grandma, I'm coming over for dinner tonight, all right?" "Only if you bring that new chili bread of yours," I teased. He laughed. "Deal." That night, he arrived with the loaf still warm in his hands. We ate, laughed, shared stories. He showed me pictures of children learning to bake at the new center. Their smiles glowed brighter than any headline. After dinner, I felt lightheaded and went to lie down. "Noah," I whispered, "don't wait too long before marrying someone who can make you laugh like that." He chuckled. "Grandma, please." "You'll outlive me," I smiled. "Maybe, but if not, promise me one thing." "Anything. Keep the ovens burning." He nodded, but his eyes shimmered with worry. That night, as he left, I watched him from the doorway until his car lights disappeared. Then I sat by the window, breathing in the night air, and felt peace wash over me like a lullaby. Morning came quietly. When Noah stopped by to bring me breakfast, the tea on my bedside table was still warm, but I wasn't there anymore. He found me asleep, a faint smile on my face. The family photo clutched gently in my hand. He didn't cry at first. He just knelt, took my hand and whispered, "Thank you for everything." Then he noticed something, the faint smell of cinnamon in the room. He opened the recipe book and found the letter, the words blurred through his tears. But one line stood out like sunlight breaking through clouds. "Bread fills stomachs, but kindness feeds hearts." He pressed the letter to his chest and wept, not out of loss, but gratitude. A month later, he organized a small memorial inside Grandma's table. Friends, neighbors, and bakers from every town gathered. The air was thick with the scent of freshly baked loaves and quiet sobs. Noah stood on the small stage, the same place he had once given his first speech. He took a deep breath and said, "My grandmother taught me that love rises when shared. She's the reason we're all here. Every loaf, every smile, every second chance." He lifted her old rolling pin, now polished and framed. From today, this will hang above every Heartrise kitchen in her honor. The crowd applauded, many crying openly after the ceremony. Mrs. Peterson, now gray-haired but sharp as ever, patted Noah's arm. "Your grandma would have said the bread's perfect today." He laughed softly. "Then I'd better not burn the next batch." Years passed again. Heartrise became an international foundation. Community kitchens blossomed across continents, yet every single one still had the same rule: no customer leaves hungry. In every branch, above every oven, hung a wooden plaque engraved with her words, "What's made from the heart rises again," and beneath it, her rolling pin, a silent symbol of resilience. One evening, decades later, Noah, now gray at the temples, visited the first bakery, the one that had started it all. It was still open, run by a cheerful young woman with flour on her cheeks. "Mr. Roberts," she greeted, "we still use your grandma's recipe book." He smiled. "Does it still smell like cinnamon?" "Always," she said. He walked to the old counter, touched the photo of Helen and Robert, and whispered, "We kept the ovens burning. Outside, the sky was streaked with gold, and the sign glowed softly. Heartrise Bakery." Since 1972, Noah locked the door, stood on the sidewalk, and looked up at the heavens. "Rest easy. Grandma," he murmured, "your love still feeds us." The wind carried the scent of warm bread through the street, a reminder that even after a lifetime, love, like dough, keeps rising.